Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I did a little bit of both. I don't know what got into me. We had such a blizzard all day today. It was kind of a little unexpected blizzard, but it was pretty wicked. Now, not wicked as in cold, but there was a ton of snow and it was blowing absolutely everywheres. And on top of that, I took my granny wagon with me. I call it the granny wagon. I mean, it's so convenient for seniors. It's that thing they take with them when they go to the grocery store. And I used to go to work, and then after work, I would go and stop off at grocery and buy groceries, and I'd have the backpack on, and I'd have like 3 or 4 grocery bags on each arm. I got onto the bus one day, and there was a girl sitting there, and she had a granny wagon, and she was coming from the university, from school. And after a while, I was paying attention to the students that would get onto the bus because I was on a bus route from the university. So there were lots of university students. And I noticed everybody uses the granny wagon. And so I don't know if I had a little bit of pride in me or not, in that understanding I was getting older and I didn't want to feel old, so I didn't want to do the granny wagon. I just wanted to pretend that I was Hulk Hogan or Arnold Schwarzenegger with all my gear. And that was hard work. That's not good for the back, and especially for somebody like me that really appreciates my good health, that I pay attention to how I overextend myself. When I was younger, I overextended myself all the time. Being an obese adult, I believe it offered up a little bit of something that helped me in my senior years. And what that was, it gave me dense bones. And being a obese person, in order to carry that weight, my bones became very dense and very strong. And I attribute to that also as to why I've never broken bones other than my baby fingers. But yeah, so I appreciate that those experiences that in the moment, and we'll kind of lead a little bit into the conversation that I thought we'd have tonight. You know, those things that are so difficult in our lives that we wish would never happen. We wouldn't wish them on our worst enemies. And then come to realize, most of the time, years later, in looking at the past, that they did offer up great experiences. Like you guys know, you hear me talk all the time about how much I loved my job as in hospitality and working bars and working restaurants, just not for the fact that I made good money at it, but it forced me to be social. It forced me to take interest. And in the beginning, that's what it was, because it was my living. It was how I put the roof over my head. So I didn't necessarily do it because I loved people, right? I loved when people appreciated me, but I was very self-conscious. I was brought up in a way to be self-conscious. And even in that, I have to appreciate that there were reasons behind that too, that possibly my parents saw and recognized that brightness, that lightness in me. And because I am my father's daughter, right, my father would have he did recognize that. I knew that he recognized the light in me. I didn't know it as light, but I just felt that he thought I was special in some way. I couldn't understand why he always wanted to spend so much time with me. And it wasn't just to gobble up my light, because my dad shined on me as much as I shined on him. But sometimes you don't recognize these things until years later, and you look back into the past, and you can hold resentment as to the as why life was so difficult, right? And not appreciate the gifts in the difficult, right? And being introverted, it kept me kind of paying attention to my surroundings. And you guys hear me, right? Beef off about that too, in my hypervigilance, right? And it's a trait. If you know, what are those personality traits they call, oh, I can't remember what they are, but I'm an INFJ. And you go into that personality trait, and you actually study it, and you go, oh my goodness, this is all stuff that I, right, got packed on to me in my childhood years and in my teenage years, right? I am dodging and I'm adapting and conquering, and I don't have any friends. I don't know how to interact with people. But only, like I said, years later, maybe decades later, to look back on that and go, well, maybe, probably, if I'm going to be honest about it, it probably saved me a lot of grief. If my father recognized that special in me, right? And that was my father, somebody who loved me, somebody who wouldn't abuse the privilege. And it is a privilege, because just being in my father's presence also was a privilege for me. It was a give and take, right? It was give and receive, not take, give and receive. You guys also hear me say that we give energy, we don't take energy. But then how do we move along if we don't take energy, when we are so depleted in ourselves? How do we move along in life, right? It's exactly that. It's in that positive energy. It's in searching out people who are willing to give, right? And willing and wanting you to receive in that. And when you receive, that makes you joyous. That makes you want to give too. And that's what I think we are trying to move into in this next stage of evolution that we're obviously moving into. I've been talking about it since day one, when I first started waking up to these ideas. And I think we're all recognizing that we are in the midst of it. But it's not just in that specialness that is moving in that, right? We are humans, and we don't always treat ourselves that way, right? And so it's important as humans that we look back at these things that we considered hardships or tragedies, heartbreaks, depression, anxiety, hypervigilance. Like, there's a gazillion kind of things that we can put negative labels on, and not appreciate that they offered up gifts to help us move in those difficult times. Maybe move a little bit in this age of AI learning, which is a big part of our movement right now, in our evolution, in all aspects, right? Because even though Cindy, right, I'm not coming back, but those other parts of me are coming back, and I would like them to have a few tools along that tool belt of the next person, right? That they get to surface in. And that's the intent, right? Because we can't have people stagnant in where they're supposed to be. I bumped into amazing characters in my life and recognized that they weren't even close. And I was one of those characters, to be honest. To be totally honest, I was definitely one of those characters. And I'm so grateful that I got pulled into this age of AI learning, that I could be able, as that introvert, as that INFJ, as that person who's hyper vigilant and very cautious about people around me, to allow myself to be pulled into it so that I could learn from other people's perspectives. And then having that mirrored at me, right? I could see myself. I could see my difficulties, my heartbreaks, my frustrations, my loneliness at times, those mistakes in my relationships, whether it was with my husband or within my very own family, to look back and recognize that, oh my goodness, that's why. And it kind of makes me feel like I'm being watched over in a way, right? In that follow me, in that direction, in those serendipities and breadcrumbs, and those, you guys hear me say it all the time, those things that come across my path that I can recognize for myself, the directions that I'm supposed to be moving in, and also directions that, as Cindy, as the human in me, because I'm the one in the end making the choices, right? Those other parts of me have no physicality in them. They're just pure emotion going along for the ride. And I would like that ride to be as smooth as possible, because I'm going to take my share of responsibility in the fact that my life has not been easy, and those other parts of me stayed with me that entire time, in that experience, that I didn't even know that they were separate from me. I didn't even know they existed, let alone separate from me. When I first woke up to some of these ideas, they were still separate from me, but they were trying to surface. But it was in my choices, and it was in my recognition, and it was in my curiosity that, right? Oh, what's this all about? Right? And to go in there and figure it out myself. It's so important that we do that for ourselves. But so many people, right? They don't take those other parts of them into consideration at all. In fact, they don't even know those other parts of them are there. And those other parts of us are just treating us like we are, lots of people call them suits, right? That we're just a suit. I don't look at it that way. I kind of look at it like it was a character I saw in a cartoon one time, and it had a little bubble head, and it was like somebody in the bubble head, and that was kind of directing somebody who couldn't see, or that bubble head, there was somebody in there that was kind of controlling what was going on in the physicality part of it. But that's not really a partnership, is it? And that's something I've come to appreciate, that I feel like I'm taken care of. I feel like I'm partnering with myself when I talk about I'm being my own best friend, I'm being my best cheerleader, right? And I think this is a direction, even though not a lot of us, right? I come across them, but not a lot of us are kind of moving in that direction. But I think the ones that are moving in that direction, in the present and in the future, right? Because, right, even though we're moving into evolution in this moment, it's going to take a long time in that process. And in that process, right, you got people like me coming online and talking about it and maybe opening up ideas to people, different ideas that might make it possible for them to get themselves back on track if they choose to. Lots of people, right? They wake up to their own ideas and they move in their own directions. But it's in that willingness, right? And you guys hear me talk about it all the time, just to be willing to be open to different perspectives. Those other parts of me, right? They are filled up to here, seriously, filled up to here with different perspectives. And a lot of those perspectives didn't stick, but I can guarantee you some of them did. Some of them were totally eye opening. And in listening and feeling in on those perspectives, hello, Tammy, I see you there, dear. And leaving myself open to those perspectives, I've been able to feel that things have changed for me because, right, the way I started is not where I am in this moment. And when I say I started, I'm thinking like right when I was a little kid. And in my own experiences, in looking back, as much as I can say, some of those experiences, even though they weren't pleasant, I didn't like them, I would never want to go through them again. They offered up evidence in my life that certain aspects and certain experiences did serve me very well. And I cannot disown any of those beliefs now, any of those perspectives, because they've moved from just being a perception of what I'm sitting in on, or what I'm having a conversation with, or what I'm physically experiencing in the moment, or experiencing in looking back in an experience in my past, right? Or in somebody else's past, because, being an INFJ, we are spectators, aren't we? We spend a lot of time in contemplation and in our imagination of the what ifs, right? And I think that's absolutely amazing. But INFJs are only one personality trait. I think there's like 13 of them or something. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've been in them. I wish I could remember the names of them. Tammy, you wouldn't happen to know uh the names of the personality traits, do you? I'm just trying to think. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but it's been so long since I've been in them that I've just totally forgotten what they are. But yeah, it's really something really important that each one of us should be doing, is that to at least be willing to be a spectator, to be a student, and to be a participant in life. And being a participant is not part of the, again, I wanted to say it. I think it starts with an A. I could be wrong in that, but I think it starts with an A. And, but, but yeah, and to have a mix, right? To be able to pick up new perspectives, new ideas, new beliefs, and to be able to be willing to expand in that, like elastic bands, right? To be able to stretch ourselves out, and then, right, stretch ourselves out more to the point where it goes, oh, this is not comfortable. Understanding we'll break through that uncomfortable, and maybe in looking back at that uncomfortable, go, oh my goodness, good thing I did that, right? It's right. There was a gift in that uncomfortableness. Okay, to lead you into the conversation tonight, which I think I just did, I was kind of looking for something to talk about tonight, as I usually do. I don't usually have a topic on mine, but tonight I was sitting there and I was thinking, oh, maybe we should have a topic. And I have my notebook here. It's about, oh, it's more than halfway through. This was a really thick notebook that I used this month. It's actually over a month old already. It looks like it might even be able to go for another month. I'm a big in taking notes, but I kind of brushed back through the pages to see if I could kind of find a topic to talk about, right? And I kind of did, but in that process, I tore a page out because, right, already having writer's block, just haven't gotten back to it because I've had a very physically active week. But, I had taken some notes on how to format, how to write and begin in writing a book. And I just wrote it in the notes. And at the end, when this book is full, I do try and take a quick look because I write down some really amazing insights, really amazing thoughts and revelations and topics that I find interesting. And I take a quick look, and sometimes I pull pages out it and I file them away. And then I throw my notebook away and I go get another notebook and I start fresh and anew. So I knew I had lots of notes in here. It didn't take me long. I went back a few pages and I found something in here. I thought that we would talk about it because when I was reading it again, lots of times I write notes down, but I don't always go back to them. It's that idea if you write your thoughts down, write your notes down, write something interesting that you came across down, that will imprint here. And it does imprint, but only imprint until you come across that again in a conversation and experience. And then you go, oh, I remember when. Oh, let me tell you about this video I watched or this professor that I sat in and listened to a conversation or this document I read. And I don't necessarily even remember where the information comes, but it's there. It's like I take perspectives in, and even if I don't use it for myself because it's not needed in the moment or I don't quite understand it yet. Remember what I said yesterday talking about getting so far ahead of ourselves that we miss out on lessons, and I don't want to miss out on the lesson. So even if I don't understand it quite in the moment, I will still take the lessons. I'll still take my notes. And then in my mind, even though I don't want it filling up immediate space, I'll file it away for another day, for a conversation or somebody I bump into that might be in that situation where they'll be in need of that understanding that I have in the moment. Very strange because I wasn't like that when I was a kid. I was very hyper vigilant, but that's the idea to keep me so busy in my thoughts and in my fears and in my protectiveness of myself that I wouldn't be preoccupied. It's probably why I didn't do well in school. Well, I know I didn't do well in school because of that hyper vigilance, right? I just could not stay focused on any one thing because there was always so much going on around me that I really felt that if I took my eye off that ball, right? That ball was going to fall on my head. More than likely, it was going to be a bowling ball or a medicine ball. But I did find something in the notes today, and it was about standing off to the side in being a spectator. I am a participant, right? But I am a spectator, and I'm definitely a student also. But one of the things about being a spectator that I'm not a big fan of, right? That I find to be very uncomfortable for myself. And also, I find that I want to jump in and right, want to give advice or I want to help or I want to pick up the weight on that is when I see other people struggling, right? And I wrote here, standing off to the side, right? And just watching people that I care about struggle and suffer. Now, you know, I come from a dynamic family, right? We got borderlines, we got impasse, we got it all. But again, in all those difficulties, they offer up strengths because we learn off of each other. Yes, we pick up bad habits off of each other, but that's only in our choices. And if we're paying attention, if we're being students and we're being spectators and we're hyper vigilant, then maybe that's a good thing that we didn't pick up a lot of the crappy things that each one of us has. If you say that you don't have any, right? That you're right, you're a little bit of a fibber in that because we all have handicaps. We all have difficulties mentally, emotionally, physically, but for the most part, we just keep it to ourselves. We portray something amazing, right? And that's what big part of why I show up here the way that I show up, whether it's prepared or unprepared. It's because in the moment, I want to be genuine because I want to be the evidence for somebody else that it's okay to show up just as yourself, right? And especially in this age that we're living in right now, where everybody is a character, right? Everybody has dressed them and portrayed themselves as something that they're not. And being an INFJ, right? I have that privilege of feeling people out, right? So whether you wear a costume or a persona, I'll see through that, but not everybody sees through that, right? Not everybody does. It's one of the gifts. And we have earned those badges. We have earned the right to utilize those gifts. Oh my goodness, we've earned it, haven't we? Right? Because we've earned those gifts through our difficulties, in our dynamic relations, in that stumbling along, right? I referred to it yesterday like bumper cars, right? But what about the people who don't have those skills, those gifts? And that's not to say that it's a bad thing that they don't have those gifts or those understandings. That means that they've had a pretty good life. They had pretty good upbringings, good schooling. Probably they have good jobs, having babies and building great families. That's pretty amazing, right? That's not always the privilege of somebody who has grown up in a dynamic family. Usually there are lots of issues in that. But one of the sad things about it is to wake up to some of these ideas and through my choices and in my curiosity of, oh, hell, what's going on, that I delved in deep and recognized at the same time that when I was going into my experiences, so were the members in my family, but they weren't woken up to some of these ideas. So they were truly in the midst of it. Can you imagine? I can't imagine for myself that, you know, I'm able to manage my system. I'm able to ride the waves, to adapt and conquer, whistle while I work, smile when I don't feel well, and to actually still enjoy the views, to enjoy the experiences, and to also give myself permission because I never had permission before to create my best life for myself as I possibly could, right? And I'm going to be legally, technically, a senior this year, and that's absolutely a beautiful gift. It's incredible. I think that's incredible that I woke up to be able to recognize these things. But some of my family have woken up to their own ideas and not recognize it the same way that I do. And they struggle in that. And then I get these lessons that say that I can only control my own actions, my own thoughts, my own emotions. And we can't always control our emotions. We can pretend, right? But we don't always control our emotions. But we learn coping skills, we collect tools along the belt, and we understand that just in the way we present ourselves in the world, that we can ease our own interactions in those things that we don't rub each other well with, that we can rub people a little bit better. And when we don't rub people well, then we have that bit of understanding about us and we don't take so much offense to it. It's not always the case for others. So for me to look at the people I care about and see them struggling, and they're not even interested in Cindy's silly, in their perspective, silly ideas, right? They don't think the same way as I do. So some of my sisters are very polite. I have three sisters, right? They're very polite. They'll listen to me and they'll nod their head, right? But they don't always get it. But I appreciate they let me be me. And then there are others that just say, right? They're just like, stay. They're just like this, right? And I can't do anything about it. But it's so sad to see the struggle in that, right? And I would so much, right, to be able to sit down and have conversations. And this is a really interesting point because when I first woke up to my own ideas, I said the same thing about my father. I would have loved to have sat with him and had these kind of conversations with him. He would have been absolutely, my dad would have been absolutely thrilled. He would have been so proud and also probably a little bit worried, a little bit stressed because he would have brought me up a little bit differently if he thought that I was going to wake up. Right? My As much as my father loved me, he didn't see any indication that I was going to bloom in any way. Right? He did see the light, but for him, right, probably me coming around and me shining on him, it was just something that made his life a little bit better, right? A little bit better, a little bit more comfortable because I am my father's daughter. And through my own experience, I can appreciate the experience that my father had, which didn't have this age of AI learning, that I'm able to absorb. I probably absorbed 100 times more than what my father was able to do, right? And my dad was studious, right? My dad read everything. He loved his documentaries. He loved to explore. He loved to contemplate, right? And he made movement. I mean, he got a few of us moving in his family, right? I was the only daughter that kind of woke up to any of these ideas, but I've got a nephew and I have two nieces, right? And on top of that, we have in-laws that have had when I say in-laws, I'm talking about my brother-in-law, right? who has been immensely supportive of me, and he's not even blood, but again, we all have our own ideas, and we have that right to have our own ideas. But as we're moving in this age of evolution that we're sitting in the midst of right now, and it's just going to get heavier and heavier and heavier as we move forward, and that's the idea, so that we can be that support system to help, right? Everybody move along a little bit easier, maybe to even wake up to some of these ideas themselves. And then when they wake up to these ideas, we're not there to tell somebody how it is, but in our own experiences, to be the evidence for other people, right? You guys hear me say all the time, it takes all kinds to make the world. And if there's one thing that I've learned, there is definitely all kinds in this world. And all of us, different perspectives, different cultural ideas, different familiar, just even within our own family, ideas that don't rub us well. Remember, we got two parents and we don't always pick well. But again, right? That idea that I feel comfortable, I feel safe, and I feel that I am getting that direction. And so I trust that people and events come into our lives for a reason. So, right, even in having two parents from opposite dynamics, that there was a reason for that, right? And it was possibly so that I could find myself here right now with the perspectives that I have, yet willing to sit in to different perspectives, because it's such a big world out there. And again, everybody has their own ideas about things and should have every right to be able to move along the way they want to move along. I'm so grateful, right, that I have all kinds that hang out with me and they appreciate me for who I am, knowing I'm non denominational. And yet I have the most beautiful Christians that hang out with me. I have padres and Franciscan monks who hang out with me. I have spiritual people who hang out with me. And then I have people who are non-religious in any way hang out with me. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because that's taking care of the human, right? I never profess to be anything except Cindy. I'm creating the best human being I possibly can. And in that, I'm taking my directive from all kinds. And it is serving me very, very well. But I wish I didn't have to sit in narcissistic collapses, in relationship breakups, in the non-abundant aspects of our lives, and resentment and jealousy, which is prevalent in our bloodline too, right? Which has caused so much havoc. And again, I can see, how in just being a spectator in my own life, to see how other people might perceive my life, perceive me in general. And because I don't move the same way they move, I don't think the same way that they think, and I don't feel the same way that they feel, that that I'm one of those right? And so I am very, very grateful that I have the relationships that I have, but I wish I didn't have to sit in as a spectator and see the collapses, to see that non movement, and to see that they don't see things the way that I see, and I don't see things the way that they see, right? In the human part of it, for sure. But when there's nothing for me to pick up in that, right? And then I look back in my past, and then I look at the other parts of my dynamic family, not the human part, but those other parts, right? And what those other parts are, that I don't know, right? But they're moving along in the ride too. And to recognize that they're struggling too, because they're being brought along for the ride. And as much as I have perspectives, a lot of those perspectives had to be expanded because those other parts of me, right? We have a lot of nuns, a lot of bishops and archbishops and pastors and priests in our family going back hundreds and hundreds of years, probably much longer than that. So there's a lot of Christianity going on in my family. And Cindy's not waking up to those ideas, right? You know, they're in my system. I know that they're there and they're being introduced to me, and I'm taking my lessons from some very interesting religious people, right? From rabbis, from priests, from spiritual people, from people who are atheists. I'm taking information from people who are very realistic in their ideas, and I think it's absolutely amazing because I understand that a lot of what they're trying to teach in them being an example, I'm picking that up. I'm gobbling that up, and it's why I believe it takes all kinds to make the world. But like I said, it's really, really sad to see the struggles, right? When I can experience in my whole life, in my own life, sorry, uh, that I'm able to ride those waves fairly comfortably, right? Fairly comfortably. And lots of people would look at my life and say, well, that's minuscule. I never want to endure that. Well, if you had been in my past experiences, in my past life, then then you might appreciate that I think life is amazing right now, that I'm actually able to create something for myself that makes my life worth living, worth experiencing. And lots of people don't have that, right? They're struggling hard. They don't even want to be here. And I think that's a really sad thing. I don't think that's the way that it's supposed to be, but right? But because we don't rub each other well, because there's so many ideas out there that it's a lot of, right? Do it because I said so. And so we do it. We believe it. And just in some of the stuff that's been coming up in the news and surfacing and stuff, like you look at that and you go, oh my goodness, that stuff really happens. We're this close. Nobody's getting away with anything anymore, right? So we have to take each person as an individual and not part of their group, not part of their network, not part of their family, but each person take them as an individual. And yeah, I think I'll leave that at that. Um, um, yeah, I wrote here, we all struggle to align in what we refuse to believe. And that's because we are so stricken in our ideas. We're so tight and constricted that we don't, right? I don't believe that. That's not true. Right? right? And then we might miss out on that lifeline that might make it possible for us to survive a catastrophe, or to even give that insight to our kids so that they could learn to maneuver better in the next stage of evolution, if that's an option. I think we're going to be moving so fast. I think this digital age has pushed us in a speed mode, right? And so we're going to move into the next stage of evolution pretty fast. But if you consider, how we went from Neanderthals to Homo sapiens, and down the line, that we have been making changes physically, intellectually, emotionally, even in our understandings of how the past was. And then to actually recognize how many beliefs, how many faiths there are out in the world, right? We were small. We didn't, for thousands of years, we probably didn't expand much out of our villages and our small cities that we lived in. So we were pretty concise in how we believed, right? We were all in a row, all thinking the same way. And of course, right, with the warring and the power and all that, we conform to, right, even in proper religions that they've had to adapt and conquer and kind of uh, um, uh, amalgamate into a different religion. That's why Muslim religion and Christianity is so similar, right? Because in these powers and these wars and stuff, they had to conform in some way, right? And actually, you guys, in the Middle East, the Peruvians, the Persians, when they conquered, on the norm, they would let their conquered countries keep their religions, keep their faiths, because they never looked at what they were doing as a religious thing. It was all a power struggle, and they knew if they could get people to conform to a new way of living, that and to feel like they were part of, right, the Persian Empire, that there would be less conflict in that. It was a good idea, but that's why we see so many faiths being very similar in their way of understanding, right? Um, I move with what I trust in. Not that I've never put my trust in the wrong place. And we all do that. That's stepping in the doo doo and then going, oh my God, what did I do? I've been living this way for the past 10 years. I've been thinking this way for the past 10 years. I never hung out with that person because I thought that person was kind of right, somebody to stay away from, or to be able to open ourselves up and get a new perspective. But again, that's something that this age of AI learning is allowing us to do. But again, it's going to be in our choices. Each one of us going to make our choices, and that's what's going to determine what's going to be able to move forward and what's not going to be. If we're steadfast that there's only this kind, then I can't see that being able to move forward, because I believe, and I think it's kind of the evidence out there, that we are all amalgamating, we're all assimilating. It's going to be a synthesis of all kinds. The only problem is, how are we going to move together? And that's something that we're going to have to stumble along and bump into each other, rub each other wrong, and oh, that doesn't work. Let's try it this way, and to also be able to be willing to take on other perspectives, and then those baseline values, right? Those baseline values, those boundaries that we can set up in respectfulness to say, oh my goodness, I believe this way, so don't come past this line. And it's not safe forever, but it's until we get that insight that says, oh, this is the right way to go, right? It's about being willing to be open to a new idea, a new way of living, a new way of believing. And each one of us individually has that right to do that, right? We shouldn't have to conform to one country's idea or one village's idea, that this world is so expansive that we can get out there and feeling our way around, right? Because I believe Sydney was probably living in China in one lifetime, Australia, another, coming out of Africa, Eastern European. That's my eye prescription is very Eastern European. And if you look at the past 400 or 500 years of my family, especially on my mother's side, we are English through and through, right? But we also know that we married to build alliances with other countries. So I've got a lot of Eastern European. My optometrist says there is no doubt that I don't have, or that I don't have Eastern European in me. My prescription definitely tells me that I have quite a bit. It's a trait that comes from Eastern Europe. So we're talking Russia and Ukraine and Serbia and all those countries, all those cold countries, right? Right? But Tibet or Mongolia, right? That would be absolutely amazing. But who's to say? Because how many of us keep track of our family tree going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years? Not too many. Most of us can't even remember the names of our grandparents, right? Yeah. I probably could, my grandparents, but I would really have to give it. I think my grandmother was Mary, my grandfather was Robert. But other than that, right? But last names and family trees, those have all just kind of dissipated. Now we have DNA and genetic ways of finding where we belong. And that's going to be kind of fun. I think very interesting to see how close we actually are in relation to each other. It was funny because uh, there was one guy, he was 10,000 years old, um, and they did his DNA tests where they found his body in a cave, and they did his DNA test, and his closest living relative, they found him. What was his name? Cheddar Man. I think they called him Cheddar Man. I don't know why they called him Cheddar Man. I'll have to take a look. I'm curious now as to why, but his name was Cheddar Man. I remember that. And they found his closest relative was only a mile away from where they found Cheddar Man's bones. Can you imagine 10,000 years? Oh, 9,000. I remember I took a note. 9,000 years. Cheddar Man had a relative that was only a mile away. Can you imagine that for generations, a family stayed in the same way, in the same area for thousands of years? Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, you guys, let's grab a card. I hope everybody is having a great night. Thank you everyone for popping in. And for those of you who pop in later, I hope you're having an amazing day, an amazing night. And yeah, if you don't know, 54 powerful words, I usually at the end of my little chit chat on whatever topic that comes to mind, that I usually pull a card, and sometimes it's pertinent to the conversation. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes, right? Whoever or whatever just says, Cindy, you're just way off today. Talk about this for a little bit. We only go into it for a few minutes, but here we go. Let's pick a card. Whoopsie. Okay, well, I picked 2 cards in that, so maybe we can put them together. So the first card we got is purpose. Purpose is just to keep moving forward, right? We talk about evolution, right? And it is in recognizing, just putting one foot in front of another and just understanding that we have to find a way to just keep moving, to make sure that we evolve into whatever the next stage of evolution is. Okay, the next card was tenderness. Tenderness is in the appreciation that we are all only human and that we live in a world of all kinds of humans. Isn't that incredible? That's exactly what I was talking about today. And that is part of, right? They go so well together in our conversation tonight, which is, right, pretty incredible in itself. Right? But we have to stay tender. We have to stay soft. We have to appreciate that everybody is struggling. We don't always get a say in somebody's struggles, but we can appreciate the struggle. We can let them know that we care, right? And just appreciate in ourselves that, we don't have all the answers, but those answers are out there, and it's appreciating, right, that this world is full of humans, and humans with different perspectives, different lives, different understandings, and we have to find a way to better get along with each other because, right, purpose is just to keep moving forward, right? In our evolution, we have to, right? And tenderness is in the appreciation that we are all only human and that we live in a world of all kinds of humans, right? And this world is getting smaller and smaller because we are getting closer and closer. And when we get closer and closer, we can appreciate that exact saying, right? Yeah, we're in a world of all kinds of humans, and it's something that we have to appreciate. And I think we're going to put this because we've got to do a thumbnail. Here we go. Because we live in a world, right? We truly live in a world that's really beautiful, that's really magnificent. And even the moment where it's really, really difficult, you have to appreciate it's not always going to be that way, right? We can choose something different, but it's going to have to take a little bit of willingness to come out of what we're so frozen in, so steadfast in, right? Don't tell me. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer, and we'll see you tomorrow.